Coming up on The Returned.
I saw my body. I knew I was dead. I was floating face up in a pool of love. There was a ball of light approaching. God reached out of the tunnel.
Hi, and welcome to The Returned. The truth always follows you back. Hi, and welcome to The Returned, a place where we share near-death stories, out-of-body experiences, spiritual awakenings, signs from spirit, and the journeys of healers and lightworkers from around the world. Today, we're sharing space with Janet Tarantino, a best-selling author, a near-death survivor. She's had 3 near-death experiences in which she encountered Jesus, angels, and came back with powerful moments that changed the course of her life. Janet, welcome to The Returned.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're very welcome. Janet, I would like to ground ourselves in who you were prior to your experiences, giving us a little bit of insight of who you were before. And also, I always love to know if spirituality or religion played any role in your life in those times.
Well, at that time, this all started when I was young and hit me through different portions of my life. When I was young, my parents were Christian, and they did go to church. But my brothers and I have a sister too, but she was 5 years younger than myself. We went to school all week, so we didn't want to go to school on Sunday, Sunday school. So we whined enough that eventually our parents relented and let us stay home to play, because that was, in essence, my version of communing with the Lord by playing outside and all the activities there. So I was more interested in this world than I was in a spiritual world. So they gave us the permission to choose the religion that we wanted. And as life went on, I got married, had 3 children, and we didn't go to church. He had talked about going to church, but it was to make connections for business. And I didn't think that was, quite appropriate. So we failed to go. So most of my life I didn't go until after the second NDE. Then I started being called back to the church a little bit. So that's about me. But I was a network coordinator for a large snack food corporation, and so after these experiences, then I became a NDE researcher, NDE speaker, an inventor, a YouTube host, an author, a caretaker, and it changed my life. So, and I'm very happy with everything that came out of it.
Oh, that sounds lovely. Your life sounds so nice,
Oh,
right?
yes,
It does.
I
It really
enjoy it.
does. And you've done so much service.
It was a hazard during the near-death experiences, because during those time frames, I had no knowledge of NDE experiences,
Mm,
because back then, it was not in society yet, and I didn't have
right.
any spirituality in my family either, so I had nowhere to go with it. So I tucked it away and didn't tell anybody about it. So, as many of us do.
Uh-huh. A
Hmm.
lot of us do that.
Yeah.
How do you feel about taking us through your first NDE?
How about if I start with my third NDE, because that umbrellas everything, because I have a life review in that one.
Absolutely. We'll start wherever you feel most comfortable.
Okay. So I'm going to start, since I was a young child. I had a number of odd events in my life, like you did, but many of
Mhm.
us discount them. And I discounted these in because I wanted to get back to real life, and I'd never heard of the near-death experience. And I was very grounded individual and wasn't looking for a mystical world, but the Creator had other plans for me, and that comes down the road. With this in mind, I'm going to start with the most spiritually intense NDE, which is my third NDE because it's the foundation of my story. It wasn't until this NDE that I was shown that I had two previous NDEs during my younger days. And at this time in my life, I was the network coordinator, and I had been a single mom of 3 children. And I had gotten married, and my husband Gavin and I purchased a ranch in the country because he loved country life, and we moved to the country. But it was close enough to the city that I could commute to work, and he could too. But one fall season, I developed an allergy that I'd never had before, and I noticed that after our daily chores with the horses and the dogs and cats, we went inside, and I was very congested. I assumed it was because of the hay and the stuff outside that was congesting me, which had never happened before. So I would take decongestants when I got in the house to clear up my sinuses. But one particular night, the congestion was worse than usual, and I went to bed. I propped 3 pillows on top of each other so that my body would be at a 45-degree angle so I could breathe better, and I fell to sleep. But I expected to get a good night's sleep, but instead I died. My breathing had been cut off. So during the nighttime, um, I felt I couldn't breathe, and I reached for my husband um, to get his attention, and I couldn't feel him. And then I called for him, and I said, "Gavin, help me, please help me," but he didn't respond. Then suddenly I found myself instantaneously, without effort, out of my body, and I felt like I had taken the biggest, freshest breath of air that I ever had, but it was not an environment that had air. It was different. Um, I was floating in a velvety darkness of unconditional peace, love, and tranquility, and it felt magnificent. It felt like a most magnificent spa day, times a million, and I was instantly connected to the universal consciousness, and I knew everything was as it was supposed to be. I could see myself lying in bed below when I looked down, and I saw my body, and I saw my husband with his back toward me, laying on his side. I knew I was dead, and I was surprised about how I looked from this perspective. And I wanted to see more of my physical body, and just by that desire, I found that I zoomed down to my body from different perspectives. And then I returned to above, but not at the ceiling height. I went a little higher than the ceiling height because the roof line had melted away. So it was no longer there. At this time, I felt like I was floating face up in a pool of love. And I was kind of felt like I was at a 45-degree angle. And I could feel my energetic arms elongated and floating out to my sides. And they were elongated because they were no longer encapsulated in the physical body. I saw a silver cord float by very slowly in an environment that had no atmosphere, and it went very slowly from left to right. And I didn't know what that was, but it was a silver cord. And I noticed when my attention was drawn to the right that there was a ball of light approaching off to my right, coming toward the room. And while the light approached, I was more interested in what was happening down at my physical body, because I noticed something lifting out of my physical legs. What I saw was an an energetic, uh, blue energetic shimmering energy, the color of the sky on a beautiful day, floating up out of my feet. First, it came out of my feet, then my shins, then my thighs. And at one point, I wanted to see it, so I zoomed down to my waistline and watched it bubbling up out of my body. And when that energy escaped my body, I could feel it drawing up toward me. It was pulling into me. And that was because I was the energetic consciousness that had already left the upper part of my body. And I was watching the remainder of my spirit leave the lower half of my body. So I, in spirit form, had stretched and elongated to get out of my physical form, probably because it was a near-death experience and it wasn't my actual time to go. I don't know, but
Right.
I think that might be the
Mhm.
case. Um, Somehow, because I was connected to the universal consciousness, from the moment I left my body, I knew this was my own slice of the creator spirit. This blue energy was my slice of the creator spirit. Some call this the Holy Spirit, or some simply call it spirit, but it's God's spirit. Or you can call it soul, your soul. And that's why Source says that he lives life and experienced life with us, because he really does, because his spirit is in our body. It's our slice of our consciousness. So when that blue energy totally left my body, it finally floated up to me and I became whole again. That's when I morphed into the shape of an orb that glowed. And I felt like I was sitting in a wand of cuddly, cushy love. Well,
Mm.
the metamorphosis took place, and this is how I can explain it to you. Um, I can not only sense my shape because my energetic spiritual arms seemed to pull in and cross across my chest, and my spiritual legs pulled up and folded into my abdomen
Mm.
as I changed into the orb shape. And at one point, um, my vision went through a fishbowl effect, because as the transformation took place, and then once the transformation was complete, then my vision was crystal clear. And I was amazed that I no longer needed the glasses that I so badly needed, because ever since childhood, I was borderline blind and I had to wear Coke glasses. When I finally graduated to contact lenses, I would have to feel for my glasses in the morning because I couldn't see them before I put my contacts in. So that's
Wow.
how bad my vision was during
Wow.
my lifetime. Since then, I've had LASIK surgery and things have gotten better. Um, then suddenly, this glowing light that had been approaching zipped into in front of me and instantly stopped before me and miraculously grew into an incredible heavenly light being that was Jesus. Initially, I could see Jesus's hair, the shape of his face, and his clothing, but I couldn't see the details of his face clearly because of all the radiating light, and because not only from him radiating, as an orb of light, I was radiating light too. So there was that interfered too. But I could see that he was infused with light, and he had rays coming out of his heart center. And Jesus knew who I was. And he loved me regardless of my successes or my failures. And I loved him so much I felt like I could burst from the love I wanted to give him.
Yeah.
I worshiped him. And just living and being is what Jesus loved, just like each of us. We are unconditionally loved just for who we are. Um, Jesus was in front of me with his arms open wide and gave me a sense of, behold, I'm here. And he had brown hair. I could see chestnut through the rays of light. You know how you can see the shafts of the
Mhm.
light in brown hair as the light goes through it. And I could see that wisps of hair were gently going across his chin. I couldn't feel any breeze, but I knew it was there by the scent, by the movement of his hair across his chin. He wore a floor-length gown of white, and he had a rope tied around his waist, with the excess hanging down the front of the gown. The sleeves gently hung off his wrists. Um, I don't know what they called those kind of sleeves, but his arms were always opening wide, and I was in awe of who I was seeing, and I couldn't speak. I just gawked and watched him. I just observed and basked in the love that I was being given. In the meantime, I noticed a second ball of light approaching um, from off to the left. But I turned my focus back to Jesus because he held his uh, right hand out to me in a gesture of, "Come take my hand." And then he said, "It's time to come home, Janet." When he told me it was my time to go, I thought about my daughter Gina because we're very close. She's my daughter, and you know how women like to go shopping and spending time together. And my boys
Yeah.
have other priorities, their friends and stuff. And I wondered how she'd take my death. But my thought was answered without even having to say anything. He knew my thoughts, and he said, "She'll be okay." Now, I told her that, and she said, "Like bleep I will." She she but anyway, suddenly, the
Mhm.
second light that had been approaching from the left was now larger and was beside Jesus, and I could see clouds bubbling around. This was a bright light, and I could see clouds bubbling around the edges. And it looked like it had a cornucopia shape, um, but this light was actually alive, and it was made of the purest, untainted, unconditional love that can't be fathomed. Uh, it was God in His essence, and I can
Yeah.
honestly say that He loves us no matter who we are. And even his love was more powerful or equal to Jesus, but it was mind blowing. The love I felt,
Mm.
and I could feel even though the light was white, I could feel the colors of the rainbow coming out of it, and colors I'm sure I didn't recognize. And that's when God reached out of the tunnel and He embraced me. Um, It was like I had my back, toward his chest, and his arms were wrapped around my front, and that's when I had a life review. When God showed me many movie moments of my life, he told me, "Understand these moments. They matter." Some of these moments I recognized because they had already happened yet, and had already happened, and some I didn't recognize because they hadn't happened yet. They were due to come in the future. Of course, I didn't realize that they were scheduled to happen that way, but I knew I didn't recognize them. So as you can imagine, I didn't want to go back to my body, but God had other plans for me. He wanted me to stay in this earthly world and he knew because I didn't want to go back to my physical body, the angels came for me. That's when they came. And this time, just like I morphed from a blue energy into a shape of an orb of light, I formed from an orb of light into a white translucent figure of a person, and
Yeah.
that shows that we can change forms if however we want and desire to.
Right.
The angels gently touched my arms above the elbows while I was in this white translucent form, and they lifted me high into the sky above our ranch. then they jumped us forward in time into the future, and it showed me what would happen if I chose to go to heaven. And the strange thing is that even though I was viewing this, that it was going to happen, I lived it too. Um, to, to simplify what happened, I'll explain it like this. I could see the inside, the outside of the ranch, because the roof line had melted away and was no longer there. I could see the land of the neighboring homes and all the lay of the land. I could see since we lived in the country, I could see two tiny beams of light coming up the gravel road. And they were so far away, they were just very tiny dots of light. But yet, I was in that vehicle. I felt like I was in that vehicle. I could see down the road. I could see behind me. I could see my husband and I lying in bed. I could hear the crunch of the tires as it went over the rocks, like my ear was next to the tire. I had become wood with anything, with everything. And I didn't want to go back to my body. I still didn't want to go back to my body. I saw my husband in the living room calling for help and or pacing back and forth. He had already called for help and was waiting for the emergency vehicles to arrive. And that vehicle that was coming up the road ended up being an ambulance that was going to try and save me. And as it went up the drive, there was one spot in the quarter of a mile drive that used to wash out when it rained quite frequently. And I could felt the lurch of the ambulance as it went over the bump, like I was in the vehicle, even though I was still high in the sky. So this proves that our spirit, God's spirit, can be in all places at all times, just like God can, because it's his spirit. So when we pass over, we can view everything that goes on. So this was God's attempt to try and get me to stay on earth, but I didn't want to. I still wanted to go to heaven. And then instantly I was jumped back in time to the present and was right in front of the living light of God, just on the precipice of entering God's light, which was the point of no return. And then I was shown one more image. That image was of my middle child, Kurt. And just by seeing his image, I knew something was going to happen to him in the future. And if I was not there to help him, his life might go down the wrong pathway. So how did I know that? How did I know that? Because it was planned, and I had made some kind of agreement with Kurt to be there to support him. So when I saw his picture, that's when I said, I'm not ready to go yet. And Jesus smiled and nodded his head. And that's when I changed back into my blue spirit body. And I sat my butt down in Jan's butt that was in the bed. I slipped a spirit foot into each one of her physical legs. I grabbed my spirit knees with my spirit hands, and I rocked back and forth in her body until I could get up enough momentum to lay back in her body, snap in, and help her sit up and gasp for air. And then Jan had to live her life wondering when the other shoe was going to drop for my son, Kurt. But all the while I re-entered my body, this voice from heaven kept echoing over and over again. Love is the only thing that matters. Love is the only thing that matters until I was fully in my body again. And that message is not just for me, it's for everybody. So after this experience and after finding the book that explained what happened, because I didn't know what near-death experiences was, I happened to come across a book by Sylvia Browne, And I in the in the back of her book was a little clip on her new book, and it was what happens when you go to heaven, and explained the light and the love and being out of body and everything that I experienced. And so I finally had some kind of inkling of what it was about, and that set me out on a path of discovery to learn more. The silver
Wow.
cord I did found out the silver cord I did find out is in Ecclesiastics, and somebody mentioned that to me,
Mm.
and that is when God gives the gift of the Holy Spirit, and He says that. See, how does that go? When the silver cord snaps, um, oh, it says, yes, remember your creator now when you're young, before the silver cord of life snaps and the spirit will return to God who gave it. So that's in scripture, but it's also in the spiritual community, it's referred to as the tether uh, of the physical body, the spirit and physical body into heaven. Now we're going to go back in time to approximately
Mm.
when I was 4 or 5 years old. This wasn't the very first meaningful moment, but this is a good place to start. My
Yeah.
my birthday was a day before the cutoff of kindergarten, so everybody went to school and I had to stay home because I wasn't quite old enough yet. And I was bored because everybody was in school. My 2 brothers were in school. My sister hadn't been born yet, and the neighbor girl who was my age, her birthday fell earlier, so she was in school. So I was listening to my mom on the telephone, and she was talking about adoption. Obviously, a friend of hers was considering adoption, and um, they were discussing it. But when they got off the phone, I asked her, um, "Am I adopted?" You know how kids are, and because I always felt like there was still some kind of father I was missing um,
Mm.
from my life. So I
Mm.
still must have had the
Yeah.
connection to heaven and had some sense of of a God. And she said, "No, silly, you're our little girl." And I said, "Okay." But this dumbfounds me. I don't know why I said it. I said, "Okay, but I'm going to die young." And my mom was shocked that I said that. And she said, "Quit talking like that." But pre-kindergarten age, you have no idea what age is. So,
Yeah.
um, So as I sat there contemplating what is age, that's when I saw 3 visions go through the focus of my mind. Took up all I don't know if it was before me or in my mind, but took up everything. I saw 3 a woman at 3 different ages. And come to find out,
Mm.
those were the 3 ages of my near-death experiences. So I was seeing pages of my book of life. And in the Bible, it says, um, "You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day passed." And what I'd like to point out from this is that it says every moment. It doesn't say every second. And God specifically showed me moments of my life in that life review,
Right.
not every second.
Mhm.
So I had an inner knowing that we were supposed to be significant to my lifetime, and I knew this because immediately upon leaving my body in that NDE, I was connected. So um, now let's go to the first NDE, and the first
Okay.
NDE was when I was age 15, and I was transitioning from middle school to high school, and I was looking forward to all the activities. And there was an orientation day that I was supposed to go to, and I was looking forward to it because I wanted to see my homeroom class and find my locker and get to meet the teachers and the students and get to know the new school. But I didn't get to go. I had become very sick. And that while I was sick, my mom was worried, so she slept in bed with me. And when I woke up during the nighttime, I felt dizzy, even though I was lying in bed. And I looked up at the ceiling light, and it started to turn to the right as if it was spinning. And, and then I lost my balance and fell backwards. But it wasn't my physical body that fell, it was my spirit that had exited out of my body through the mattress. Eh, And
Uh,
then it was beside me, and it was looking up at the light. But instead of the light, then all of a sudden everything turned to bubbling clouds. And I could see in the clouds above me, there was two separate spinning motions, one on the left side of the room, and but even though everything was clouds, there was no walls at that point. I could see spinning motion on the left side and another spinning motion on the right side. But my attention first went to the clouds on the left because it opened first. And when I peered through that opening, I saw a sumo wrestler with a top knot in his hair, dressed in white in a white room, and he was surrounded in a white radiant light. And all he did was watch me. And no matter how he moved, because he got up and walked around, he would always keep his eyes locked on me. And and then I heard the most beautiful music coming out of the other hole that had suddenly opened up. So my attention went there. And that's when I saw a beautiful, stunning young woman swishing down into the entrance of the opening there. And I drew a picture. I drew a picture of all these things in my book. And she had a white long gown with layers of lace, and she had dark, almost black hair down to the middle of her back, and she was just beautiful, and she seemed to come riding in on the most beautiful music from heaven that I had ever heard. And at that time, because I was 16 and we didn't have internet in those days, we had our coloring books and we had to keep ourselves busy outside. So the only thing I could associate her with in that time in my life was a music box lady. So I called her the music box lady. And I also thought of her as Daddy's little girl because at one point she moved up and away, and I thought Daddy was putting her up on a pedestal. And um, they were discussing something. This music box lady and the sumo wrestler were discussing something. Even though he kept his eyes always on me, they were discussing something because she was now, her side was toward me, and she was facing him. And while they were discussing what they were discussing, because they wouldn't let me hear it, I decided to go look at her dress because I always enjoyed fashion. you know. So just by that desire, I was up at her dress and I was looking through the eyelets of the dress. I had gotten so small that they looked like huge caverns, and the threads had designs of themselves along the eyelets, the edges of the eyelets. And then I decided to take a look at the other side. So then I flew in and out of those eyelets all the way around, and I felt like I was a skier, zipping down the hillside with the wind blowing my hair behind me as I was racing for the finish line. But instead, I was zipping in and out and going around her dress until I was done. And then I went back to above my body. I was waiting the uh, for the sumo wrestler and the music box lady to finish their conversation. And then when their discussion was over, these two, the sumo wrestler and the music box lady, turned into orbs of light that glowed and left the room. They flew either through me or behind me, but anyway, they zipped by and they went through, they hovered behind me at first, and I could see them, I had the 360-degree vision. I could see them even though I didn't move. And they finally went through the wall, and I could see them like I had X-ray vision as they zipped around the house, and then they hovered in the side window of my room for a while. Um, and then one of them left down the side of the house. And that must have been the music box lady because the sumo wrestler stayed to watch me, I'm sure. And then when she came back, they hovered for a few minutes, and I swear I could see them turning and talking to each other, even though they were orbs of light. And then all of a sudden, they both took off and left. And didn't want them to go. I wanted them to
Oh,
stay, but eventually, I ended up having to settle back into my body, and then I went to the bathroom to throw up again.
wow.
But afterward, I discounted what happened and put it all behind me because I had no context to put it in my life. And
Uh-huh.
I found out much later that the sumo wrestler is my guide. He's who's referred to in the Bible as a watcher angel, and that's what he did. Is he watched me, and we all have angelic master guides, and the sumo wrestler was mine. And the beautiful lady, the music box lady, was my daughter, and that she was not to be born until 15 years later. And obviously, we had an agreement for me to be her mom. And if I had died that night, she wouldn't have been born. So she came back to talk to my guide and to make sure that I would stay so she could be born in the future. So that's why I thought of her. And I must add some kind of knowledge of this agreement because of my thought that she was Daddy's little girl. So, but I
Mhm.
wasn't allowed to retain that information because then I would have always wondered if I was choosing the right father to be,
Mm.
her dad. I found it interesting that whenever I came to the correct conclusion as to what one I was trying to understand these moments, Jesus would show up wherever I was and give me a confirmation. Sometimes he would put his hand on my shoulder. Sometimes I would hear his voice say yes. Sometimes I'd see him standing in front of me, nodding his head. It was just various ways of acknowledge that my understanding of the situation was correct. And that's how he works in our lives. The second NDE was these were so far apart. I didn't connect them
Mhm.
because that was at 15. This must have been in my
Mhm.
mid 30s, the second NDE. Um, and it occurred while I was on vacation during my corporate career. Um, and I had been saved by divine intervention in an accident. But this one, uh, my parents had lived a long ways away. I lived in Denver at the time, and they lived in Boise, Idaho, so they didn't get to see the kids very often. So my parents, and I didn't have family around me. I stayed near their father so that they would have, close access to him. I didn't want that to ever cease because he was a good man. We just kind of drew apart and went different directions. So um, they wanted the kids for a month, and I was saying, "Hurrah!" I can have a little bit of time to myself, but I still miss them for sure. And so I packed them up, and we had a road trip to get to Boise. But what I didn't realize is this invitation was keeping the kids out of the way for the accident that I was going to be involved in. It was his way of keeping them safe.
No.
So when we got to Boise, the kids were, uh, embraced in my parents' arms, and I stayed for some time. I only had a week's vacation, so I returned after I think 4 days, 5 days, because I would like the weekend to myself before I had to go back to work on Monday. So I drove all the way back on Friday. It was a 12-hour drive. It was just
Mm.
me, so there was no reason to stop. I could stop and get a bite to eat and stuff, and then I was back home by 8:30 in the evening. It was summer, it was still light out, and
Mhm.
the next morning when I got up, I looked in the backyard. It had a big backyard deck, and I wanted to it was June, first part of June, and I wanted to decorate it with flowers. I always decorated my deck in the house with flowers during the summertime because I loved the look of it, and I wanted them to
Mhm.
be, um, grown when the kids got back so that we could enjoy our barbecues out on the deck. And so I was looking forward to my day, and I drove to the flower nursery to get all my supplies. And on my way there was virtually no traffic in the area. When I was pulling out of the flower nursery to the left, the 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 traffic that would be coming in my direction was so far away, it was of no concern. There was only one car from the other direction going in the opposite, and it was 3 lanes on each side of the road. And so I wasn't worried. I pulled out into the middle lane and stopped, at the stoplight that was just down the road from the flower nursery, and I was listening to the easy listening music on the channel and, you know, uh, planning where I was gonna plant all my beautiful flowers, and I failed to fasten my seatbelt. I had my mind was not on what it should have been on. So, when the light cycled, then I went through the intersection and there was a big dip in the road. It was a big hill downward. And I noticed that even though there was one car ahead of me and it was in the same lane that I was in, the middle lane. And for some reason, even though I was not speeding, I was catching up to it. And I knew something was wrong. So I looked at the situation and I noticed on the left side of the road was a park, and on the right side of the road was a grassy area. And when I got down there, it was stopped in the middle of the road where there was no cross section, no road, no cross street or anything. It was just stopped like it had um, died or something.
Mhm.
Anyway, because I didn't know if there was a child that had been crossing the road, going to the park or leaving the park, I decided to stop behind the car. Then the light at the top of the hill had changed again, and all this traffic started coming down the hill, racing toward us. And it was like all the lanes were filled, um, and they were like racehorses, heading for the finish line. And the guy behind me was a pickup truck, and I knew that because he was looking to the right, like he was looking to change lanes, but there was no place for him to go. That he had no place to go, and I knew that he was going to set me. He was going to hit me, rear end me, and that's when the fear grew up in my mind, and I said, "Oh God, he's gonna hit me." And that's when I heard a voice. I was the only one in the car, and it said, "Lay down across the seat and cover your face." Well, I didn't have my seatbelt on, and I had to do what I was told. So I did lay down across the seat, and I covered my face. Then that pickup truck plowed in the back end of my car, and because I didn't have a seatbelt on, my body's knocked the seats of the backs of the front seats down, and now I was laying in the back seat, only I didn't know this at the time.
Mm.
The next thing that happened is that that vehicle had pushed my car into the car in front of me that had stopped, and now it was going to be tossed forward, but instead of being tossed forward, I was I was being I was picked up. I had a big arm come under my shoulders and a big arm come under my knees, and I was being picked up by something that I couldn't see, but was there. And all of a sudden, I was above the scene, looking down on the accident through a hole in the cloud, even though it was a cloudless day, a beautiful blue cloudless day. So that hole that I was looking through and the clouds that opened up for me to see the accident scene was the veil that separates one dimension from the other. So just like in the first near death experience, I was in this world looking through tunnels into two different worlds, the sumo wrestler and the music box lady. But in this one, I had been taken up to another dimension and I was looking down into this world through a hole in the cloud. So this experience also proves to me that our calls for assistance are answered when it doesn't alter the the learning or preordained exit point of somebody else. So,
Right.
yeah, unlike, um, so who could I tell? I mean, who could I tell about this? Who would believe me? So, but after this, after all this stuff happened, meeting Jesus, I figured, well, I better sit down and read the Bible. I'd never read it before. And so I did read it. And then these certain scriptures just popped out at me, like the silver cord, etc. And then there's another one that's calls to me in times of trouble, and I will save you and you will honor me.
Mm.
And that's what he did. I mean, he saved me. And then he wanted me to honor him because I didn't know that I was saved in that accident because I was right
Mhm.
back in the front seat again. Because what had
Mhm.
happened, even though my spirit had been taken up to another dimension, I looked down, my physical body was being tossed around the car.
Mhm.
When I was being pushed into the car in front of me, my physical body was hit the roof of the car and ricocheted back down into the front seat because my legs were over the steering wheel instead of under the steering wheel, and I was still laying across the seat. And if I hadn't looked at the pictures later and saw that it was the rear window that I saw shattering in slow motion and the front window was intact, I would never have known that I had been in the rear seat of that vehicle. So, yeah, this is just mind blowing how these things work.
Oh,
Yeah. So,
more than mind-blowing, I think. Way more than what you've had some unbelievable experiences.
yeah,
Just unbelievable.
but those are just a few because there was um, the panel of high spiritual beings. I just love this one because I was I'm one of those ones that still continue. You are too, because you keep having spiritual experiences and know what's
Mhm.
going on. And I keep having spiritual experiences too. Um, I was pulled up. I went to bed. I was visiting my fiance over in Austria, and I always loved to fall asleep with reading romance novels. And so one night I fell asleep, and then during the night I was pulled up to heaven to before this panel of high spiritual beings and for a lesson review on judgment. Well, yeah, on judgment. And so they were there. There was like 8 or 9 of them. They were some were sitting at a table, some were standing, and they said, they knew I had already learned about judgment, but they said, "Can you explain to us how you learned about judgment?" And I said, "Yes, I will." So as I explained to them how I had formed a judgment when I was a young child because I had judged my next door neighbor because he had wore a swimming suit different than my dad. My dad wore a swimsuit down to his knees, and this man wore Speedo type swimsuit. Yeah, and so I I had judged him for that. And then, I had also judged my, grandfather by thinking that he was an alcoholic because everybody said he was an alcoholic, but I never saw that of my grandfather. And but when I met, um, they also made it known that they brought Bob, my husband now, into my life for a special lesson, and the lesson was for both of us. Because after my near-death experience, you know how things I started having the third near-death experience, I had after effects, you know how that works,
Yeah.
and I could
Mhm.
see into other dimensions. And I had a lot of electrical sensations going on. I mean,
Mhm.
the lights would flicker, and, um, everything became confusing, and my husband and I at that time were one of the 75% that split up because it was just too confusing, and I had swore off men, but they brought this guy into my life, much later, and was for a special lesson plan. And he took me to Austria, where I had learned how I had misjudged people because I had judged my grandfather for living above an apartment, above a business in an apartment building. But see, in Iowa, where I grew up, they didn't
Mhm.
have, those kind of apartments above buildings, and that I was aware of. And that's a very common type of living in large cities. I didn't know that, but I had judged him, and I got to thinking about, his drinking. He was in World War II, and
Mhm.
how they did camaraderie with the sharing drink over
Yeah.
friendship over a drink. Or was it because post-traumatic stress syndrome? Uh, I
Mhm.
didn't know. I just took for granted that they knew what they were talking about, but I never saw my grandfather with a drink in his hand, nor was he ever,
Mhm.
um, intoxicated either. So I had realized I had misjudged him too. My mother didn't even know he had been in the war when until after I told her. Yeah. So she said, "He wasn't in the war." I said, "Yes, he was. I was looking at our history, and he was I saw him with a
Wow.
uniform on." So he had been misjudged by a lot of people. So you have to go back to the roots of your judgment, find out where they had come from. Had you misunderstood a statement that somebody said? Because you have to make your own determination. You can't listen to what other people say. You just
That's right.
you must,
Mhm.
um, do your own research. So that was very interesting. And as I was telling them about my memories, they all showed against the heavens and they played out around us. And as I felt like I was standing there. I could, I could see the neighbor's calf walk by and it was above my head because, the memories were so big across the sky.
Mhm.
And it was really interesting. But they also
Hmm.
made it known that they plan our lessons and how they will come to be. Because when I was being sent back to my physical body, I said, "That was so cleverly laid out for me to learn." And they were very happy that I grasped the learning. So we may we may pick, what we want to learn before we're born, but they lay out how it's supposed to happen, and that's up to us to grasp the learning. So it's just like going shopping and you're looking for your
Mm.
favorite top, "Oh, this one's nice,"
Right.
what I'm going then you have to make decisions uh, to follow through on what it is, and that can relate to another one of the experiences. Do we have time? Short
Mhm.
short one?
We have all the time you want.
Okay. This one is because after the third NDE, then these things started happening. The spiritual beings was one of the moments I was shown. I was shown another one of a white building and the word namaste over it.
Mm.
And I was uh, perusing coupon, a relatively common coupon site, and I came across a coupon for a soul painting. And I thought, gee, this is interesting, 'cause I'm investigating stuff. And I saw what my soul looked like. And I thought, if she's authentic, she'll paint something blue. So I called my
Mm.
daughter and I said, "Do you want to get a soul painting done?" She said, "Yeah." So we made a day of it and we went down to the Boulder area where she was located and had lunch. And then we went to the location. Here it is, the white building that I was shown in my life review. We went in and there was a little bridge going from one part of the building to another. We walked over the bridge, and there on a doorway where we were headed for was the word namaste. And I said, "Gina, there it is, namaste." So I asked her if she said prayers before she made it, because I had called her for an appointment and I heard that word namaste as I was making the appointment. And she said, um, "No, I don't. I do sometimes, but I don't always." But I said, "What does that mean?" She said, "My spirit honors your spirit."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I said, "Oh, that's cool." So anyway, we went in. She had all of her art supplies laid out, and she asked for permission to contact the heavenly records for a message that was, for the sitter, and it was supposed to be what she painted was supposed to be meaningful to whoever was sitting for this painting. And she started painting, it was an hour long. About 45 minutes into it, I started recognizing what she was painting. And I looked at Gina and I said, "Do you recognize that?" And she said, "Yes, I do." And it was part of my third NDE. It was Jesus and the light of God on the other side of it. And I said, "Oh, yes." I didn't
Oh
tell her
my
what it was until
goodness.
afterwards. I said, I know I'm supposed to do something, but what am I supposed to do?" And so I went home and uh, finally I said a prayer. Not that night, but after I considered all these things and some more things happened, I said, "Just tell me what to do," And so I said a prayer and I said it like, uh, "Dear Fatherly, dear Father in heaven, please tell me what to do. And if I don't get an answer, I will know I don't have to do anything and I can just keep this to myself because I wanted to stay in my comfort zone, you know." So I went to bed and not expecting an answer nor even really wanting one because I wanted to stay in my comfort zone. And the next morning, as I woke up, I heard his voice saying, "Make it about me." And he showed me visions of writing a book and talking about it. And then I had to write the book, and that's where my book came from. And that includes all
Wow.
these moments and even the ones that I haven't shared with you, but you can't make this stuff up, you know? So,
I absolutely do know that.
yeah.
I've had some, some experiences that I can't explain really. And I just wanted to say one of them because of what you said.
Uh-huh.
So mine was out of a dream. I lucid dream. I go to a lot of different places. It almost feels more real than here.
Mhm.
And I was with an aunt that had passed on. But I actually never met this aunt. I actually just knew who she
Uh,
was when I got there. She was wearing all white. She took me to a room and around there was a round table and on each side of the table was 3 beings and they were cloaked in white. I could not see their face. They were kind of blurred out but bright. It was really weird. You knew they were something to do with light. Well, she looked at me. I sat down at the front of the table with them lined there, and on the table was a velvet box, and she pushed the box towards me. And I thought, "Well, this is interesting," you know? And I picked it up and I opened it, and it was a golden amulet, and it had like an eye, like an Egyptian eye on it.
Uh-huh.
And I put the box down, she picked up the amulet, I held my hand out, she put the amulet in my hand, and then she closed my hand on top of it,
Cool.
and I woke up. But when I woke up, I was like this, like, with my hand still closed, and I was like, "Could you even imagine if it was there?" It wasn't, but that dream stuck out to me because it was so very real. I still don't really know what it is, but what I can attest to is how spirit works, and I told you before we started recording,
Mhm.
I got everything to do with this podcast from downloads and then visions, even right down to me showing me visions of me on phones, on like all different things. And I was like, oh my goodness, as I told you, are you kidding me? But so I can attest to how interesting and rewarding and how fun it is to actually learn about all these things.
Yes. Yeah.
So
And
you
the
though, my friend,
the more you
you had quite the journey.
uh, it's been fun, actually, and I am grateful for every person that has been in my life, even the
Mm,
difficult ones, because they're
mhm,
people that made me who I am today, and I'm
mhm.
extremely happy with that. And it's funny how once you share your story, people start pouring in their own stories, and,
Mhm.
um
You give them courage to be able
yes,
to speak, right?
yes.
And that's what I love about this is a lot of people that I have been meeting lately, they haven't had the courage. And some of them really didn't understand how important their story is.
Yeah,
I've met a
sometimes
few people.
sometimes they
Yeah,
think it's too short, but every story, no matter how short it
that's
is
right.
extremely important. I had a video because I accidentally happened to capture my dad's spirit leaving his body, and it's on my YouTube channel. I've got a 1-minute segment of
Oh, I gotta
just
watch that.
yeah, 1-minute segment of it. Uh, there's a 15-minute story about how this came to be, and there's 3 pictures of films of my dad in it before he died. Then there's one of the spirit leaving at normal speed, and then there's a another video of the same video at normal speed slowed down because, as you know, heaven's time is not the same. So I
Mm.
slowed it down 25%, and you can see it changes direction because originally it looks like it's going to the right. And then when you slow it down, it's actually going to the left. If you slow it down to 50%, you can see that there are light beams, separate light beams moving across the screen from right to left, going toward where my mom was laying in the next room. And she was dying because she died 9 days later after my dad. And there's the
Mm.
story about what happened between those 2, um, from the time my dad died to when she died. The last person she saw was my dad before she died, because they had always promised
Mhm.
they'd walk into heaven hand in hand together. So, yeah, go look at that, and
Oh,
that story has generated a tons of stories that people have given me, and they'll be included in my next book.
I just have a few questions that I want to ask you.
Okay.
Um, First of all, your experiences are extraordinary, extraordinary. And I feel honored to actually sit here listening. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So I have 2 pages of notes. Of course I do. But most of the questions that I did have, as you were going on, you did answer them. So
Okay.
that was really good.
Okay.
What I like to know and what I like to ask of everyone, and it's always different, but where do you feel heaven, the other side, the afterlife? Where is this, in your opinion?
Right here. It's right here. Yeah, it's just another dimension. So it's access we have access to it all the time, we just don't see it because we're the veil that's separating us, because I wasn't in another dimension far off when I was looking down back into this one. I was just above the scene looking down, so maybe it might be a little bit higher than us, but it's still in the same dimension.
Right. It always gets me when I ask people because they always say something different, right? Um, but I see the same as you. Like, I honestly feel the same as the way you think because so many people are right by their body,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
So, having said that, then, do you feel that we have to be at a certain frequency so we can actually communicate with our loved ones or anybody on the other side? Or can we all just do this?
We can all just do this, we just have to trust. Most
Okay.
people don't trust because you're getting the information anyway. Because spirit communicates in ways that with our using our emotions. A An example of a way they communicate is I was looking for a letter from my uncle Jim, and I couldn't find it, so I asked the angels to show it to me, and then I went about my way. That when I was going to make popcorn, I had to go down the basement to go get the extra popcorn. When I came up, my eyes were drawn to the corner of the table, and I just ignored it. And then, a different point that same day, my eyes were drawn to the corner of that table. I said, now that's twice my eyes were drawn to that table. I went there and I picked up each item of paper that was there. It wasn't a pile, it was just a small, but it stuck to the very bottom of that pile was his letter. And it's just, if you have to recognize those thoughts that pop into your head, because that's not you. You weren't thinking of these things when they popped into your head. These are little reminders from spirit that these things are happening. Like, you're walking out the door and all of a sudden you hear this little voice say, keys. And oh yeah, I forgot my keys. But you just turn around and go get your keys. But that was your spirit communicating with you. So always thank them. Say that, very good idea. Thank you. I left a piece of paper upstairs. Thank you for reminding me about that. And the more you recognize it, the more it'll happen. And then you have to just trust.
I believe that. So if you were to look back now, Janet, on each of your near-death experiences, what did each one have a specific purpose or message for you? Or do you think that they were all one message?
All one message. All
Yeah.
one message. It was just shown to me in little pieces. Gina being the contract with my daughter, Gina, the contract
Mhm.
with my son, Kurt, our message that heaven will answer our prayers when needs to be, the message that our life lessons are planned by the High Council of Spiritual Beings. It was all a bigger message of how life works for us.
Mhm.
And it's not just my story. This happens to everybody. You can look back on your life and you can look at the major points of your life that you remember. It could be like a wedding or something that's significant that happened in your life, and then review who's in your life at that time. What did they teach
Mhm.
you? Um, and
Mm.
you may have had soul agreements with them. In my book, I have a small section on how to do that. You can come to know that uh, who the soul contracts were and what your lessons are that are cycling over and over again because you have not learned and have not implemented the lesson. Because you can learn, but if you don't implement the learning, it'll keep cycling again until you actually implement it to stop it.
Right.
So it
Right.
could be a relationship cycle that keeps a pattern that keeps going over and over again.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, it's um, those kind of things that you need to evaluate
And why do you think that you had the 3 NDEs?
because it was in my lesson plan, my life, my life book. That's why I saw them in the first place
So, would you think that maybe like, why would we have that? If
for
we
learning.
needed like, why would we have to put 3 in there? Like,
For
was it a
learning.
way that we had to veer back onto a path, or did we have to go up to get maybe some more information that we weren't carrying through in that specific time in our life? Um, do you know what I mean? Just 3 NDEs over a course of a time,
Uh-huh.
and often they what I've learned often is that they not that they're course correctors, but sometimes I see them as course
They can
correctors.
be.
Yeah, but maybe you had maybe you needed to get information you weren't using at
Could
the
be.
time,
Could be.
right?
Yeah, I don't know. I just know that they happened and they happened
And you
for
planned
learning.
them.
Yeah, for learning.
Okay. And so you
For
believe
the
in the
bigger picture.
pre-birth planning. Mhm.
Mhm.
And the bigger picture is you sharing,
Yeah, and we have soul
bringing
contracts. We have,
bringing
there's
people to the light.
yeah, it's a complicated, not a complicated, it's actually, nothing's complicated with God, if you think about it. He
Hmm. Yeah.
doesn't make his communication, complicated. It's so ridiculously easy. That's why people don't understand it, because they just think it's themselves. But it's ridiculously easy to understand the messages. So, but my life was not only, my story was not only about God, the Holy Spirit, Jesus, all being real and the angels and our
Mhm.
guides. It was about life and how life
Yeah.
works.
Okay. So based on your experiences then, what did you learn about the nature of the soul?
It's God's spirit
So God lives through us, or maybe God experiences life through us.
with His spirit. It's
Mhm.
my spirit is looking out these eyes and talking to you. Your spirit is
Right.
talking to me. This body is only a vehicle for us
Mhm.
to uh, to motivate and walk through life. And that's why when the spirits, when the body fails, the spirit exits, like when you'll see in that video of my dad, it exits and goes back to home to God who gave it. Um,
Mhm.
that's an example, a perfect example of how the spirit leaves the body when the body ceases to function.
I have seen orbs in my lifetime. Not my own. I didn't turn into one, but I have been visited
Hmm.
by a particular orb. Was orange, and I was a very young girl. And now you're making me think that maybe this may have been some kind of maybe even past relative.
Could be. Could be. I because I changed into an orb, and in
Yeah.
that 15-minute video of my dad, I only mentioned my dad's name once in that exact time above where my TV is, uh,
Hmm.
on the screen of the TV, you can see an orb drop down into the screen just as I say my dad's name, and I know that was my dad showing me that he still lives on in the orb shape. So I recommend people always keep those pictures with orbs in them because I
Hmm.
think that is the way that the spirit travels, is in the orb shape.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's not
Mm.
limited to that, but I think they do that quite frequently. I've seen them uh, drifting up next to my bed too, even with my physical eyes. So I know they're real. I changed into it, so I know they're real. You hear other near death experiences changing into orbs of light too. So save them, and you'll come to know usually the ones that are behind you or to your side are usually your guides, but other ones that are in front of you or could have colors. They could be angels. They could be past loved ones or ascended masters, but I think they're fascinating.
What is the one thing you would say to everyone about NDEs that you think that they need to know about them?
The
Or
biggest
even the
message
living, the dying, everything, the other side?
the biggest message from NDEs is love is the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
And so, make your amends with people, forgive people, um, make things right. God is love in its ultimate form. For those that are dying, the hardest part is getting there. Dying is easy. Dying is the best thing that can happen because then you're enveloped in love of magnificence.
Janet, many people fear death and they're really afraid of like the unknown. What would you say to someone about that?
Fear is false ego appearing real. So you just have to trust, what the people that have the near death experiences say. I mean, that's about the only thing you can do. We've experienced it. Uh, I've heard the stories from my mom before she passed of what she saw in heaven and the beauty and seeing my dad and her other relatives. It's going to be a beautiful thing. So we can only um, give them our information and hope that they take it in hand.
I don't think we're ever alone in
No,
that transition, right?
no,
I
no.
watched my mother pass just a month ago, and I was with her through that. And I can honestly tell you, I knew we were not there alone. I
Mhm.
knew that for sure. I'll be actually doing a solo about all of that, coming up, but it was incredible,
Did you notice
absolutely incredible.
did you happen to notice when she left, the room became the most peaceful atmosphere that you
Yeah,
it was just full of
absolutely.
peace. Yeah.
But my mom came to me and told me she was dying. She told me 2 months before. That's how I get death premonitions, and she came to me and told me, "I'll be leaving in 2 months," basically. And that's what she did.
Yeah.
And, I had lost my stepdad a year before, and, mom got all the affairs in order and then said, "You know what? Bye." You know? I'm going
Yeah.
to find your dad,
Mhm.
basically, and that's, basically what she did. But that 10 days, changed my life and how I actually viewed passing away, transitioning, dying. It changed my whole view on it.
Yeah.
It's completely different, and, instead of looking at someone dying, I was actually looking at a life that had lived, and the journey was ending. It was so different when you change your perspective.
Mhm.
It really is. Oh, I got goosebumps. Yeah, my heart's broken still because, of
Yeah.
course, it's my mother,
Mhm.
right? And, I do try to stay strong. But let me go here for a moment. Everyone, of course, you're on the returned. Everyone who returns from these types of experiences always return with a truth. Janet, what truth do you feel you returned with that you feel humanity needs to know right now?
That we never die. We never die, and love is the most important thing. That's
Yeah.
easy.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I agree with you on that. Now, if you could now talk to us about dying to see revelations about God, Jesus, and our pathways and the nature of the soul, because you're an international bestseller?
Mhm. Yep, award winner. Mhm. Yeah.
Nice.
It's about all these moments that I was given in my life review. Uh, some of what I shared today, some that I haven't because there's too many to share. And then I talk about some of the what I learned from these experiences that will help people and how they can um, learn to find the soul contracts or lessons that are cycling as well through their life so they can utilize it that way too. Sadly, we can't know what's going on in our life unless we look in the rearview mirror. Um,
Mhm.
it'd be nice if we could plan it out and know everything ahead of time, but then it wouldn't be a lesson. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so it's all about that, but I have learned so much more, as life goes on, we evolve and we learn even more that's not in the book, and that'll be included in my next book too.
All
So,
right.
yeah.
And people that would like to connect with you, you also have I know I was on your website, and you have a YouTube channel.
Uh-huh.
And what do you discuss on your YouTube channel?
I let other near-death experiencers share their
Okay.
experiences too. I feel that's important. I have set it aside
Yeah.
for a year because I had to finish my
Mhm.
book with
Right.
other people's story because I found out that there's a lot of people that don't have enough of a story to write an entire book, and I'm helping them share their stories so that they can
Mm.
find the peace of mind that, and because they felt like they should share theirs too. So I'm helping them share their story through a book
Mm.
that I'm writing, and that's done. I just have to um, locate a publisher to get it out, and I
Yep.
have talked to one, and she said it should be done when she gets a hold of it. It should be done in 3 months. So yeah.
Mhm. And you'll let us know about that.
There'll be near-death experiences, all different kinds of spiritual experiences, and what I
Okay.
there's one large section on the dying process, people experiencing the spirit leaving their loved one's body. There's a lot of stories on that, so what you experienced,
Oh.
what I've experienced will be in there
Mhm.
too, so those
That's
kind of things.
really interesting. I can't wait till that comes
I'm
out.
hoping it changes people's point of view on the dying process and makes them more open-minded as to what, uh, their family members share, because I took care of my mom and dad for the last 5 years of their life, and because I'm a near-death experiencer, I said, "Please share with me everything, and I won't discount it," and that's what they did, and that's part of the
Mhm.
next book, so
That's gonna be really good. So, I'm sorry, I just need to ask you one more thing.
mm,
So, because of your experiences and all of that, do you think that humanity is waking up spiritually and even more waking up to, what NDs are?
yes. Mhm.
Yes?
Yeah, they're more acceptable now. People are talking about it, and, uh, with books like me sharing other people's story, etcetera, that'll it'll just keep growing and growing, because it was used to be 5% of people, 5% of the population were near-death experiences. A few years ago, it was 10%. I'm sure now it's even gonna be even higher the next time that they
Uh,
test it, because it's just growing, expanding,
yeah.
so
Well, Janet, I want to thank you from my heart to yours
my
for sharing your experiences so openly with us today on The Returned. And I want to say that stories like yours invite us to look beyond the surface of life and also the, to consider deeper mystery of who we are and where we come from. And the courage it takes and the faith behind them means a great deal to those listening.
mhm.
So
Thank you.
we're so very grateful that you're here today sharing your journey with us.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. And to all those listening or watching, if there's something that you take away from today's conversation, let it be this: life is far more meaningful and connected than we can see in the moment. Thank you for watching. And until next time, stay open, stay curious, and keep returning to the truth within you.